Okay, so that concludes my summary of why I think that you would have a very hard, oh, very shiny. Ooh. Hey there, I'm Elise and welcome back to my channel. So, despite what the title says, I cannot tell you that you will never meet a Korean oppa on Tinder. It's a probability game, I haven't done the math, and I'm not that invested. But I can tell you that whether you're Korean or a foreigner, that the odds are not in your favor. So stay tuned because I'm spilling all the tea on why Tinder in Korea is not what it used to be. Okay, so I have avoided making a video on this topic for ever. Like, I've had people ask me over the years or just suggest that I should make this kind of video, and I just didn't want to do it because I didn't want to feed into the Korea boo monster, like K-fantasy madness. This is why you've also like not never, but it's been a very long time since I posted any of my significant others on my social media accounts. I did it once years ago, and next thing I knew, one of my photos was like circulating around some AMBW forums, and my ex-boyfriend now was being characterized as a K-pop trainee, and he was certainly not that. He was a computer engineer. So I just decided, like, this is not something that I want to feed into. This is not something that I want my channel to be about. Basically, I just didn't want to be like another girl who's popular just for having a Korean boyfriend and just for like feeding into this like fantasy life. If they're not my husband, like, I'm just gonna end up deleting all this stuff anyway, so why? That's really not what I want to be. I want to have a channel that's more about educating people on what it's like to live here. But part of living here is dating, and I know that this is something that people want to see. I also know that what's out there already about dating in Korea is not very helpful. Like, it's more stories and opinions, and it's not giving you different perspectives and reasoning on why things are the way that they are. And so that's why today I am breaking my silence. We're gonna talk about dating in Korea and why Tinder is no longer, I won't say that it's not useful. I mean, I do use Tinder, but it's not what it used to be, and it's just not as effective, and I'm gonna tell you why. But before I get into it, don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram for more advice, stories, and peeks into my real life in Korea. When I first came to Korea 5 years ago and was on Tinder trying to meet people, I would say that in general, people were pretty normal. Like, they had multiple photos of themselves so that you could see who they are. They would write things in their profile so that you could make some kind of conversation. Like, of course, there were some definite no's in the bunch, but I would say that in general, people were pretty decent and at least respectful. And when it came to me being a foreigner, nobody really had anything to say about this. Like, you just, either you swiped me right or you didn't. But I can say that 5 years ago, like, while swiping, there were definitely times where I just ran out of people to swipe. And I think that this was one of the biggest complaints that Tinder got. And so every problem that there is now with Tinder, I would actually blame pretty much completely on their marketing team. Although I understand, like, they needed to make money, they needed to get more members on the platform to make money, and so all of the steps that they took to solve this problem created like a whole mountain of other problems. And so I'm gonna share what I think those major like moves were that caused these problems on Tinder. So the first thing that Tinder did was launch Tinder Passport. And of course, this was worldwide. I don't have anything against Tinder Passport. I just personally don't feel like I need someone to like chat with all day, and I suspect there's a lot of sexting going on. Yeah. I think if you're about to travel to another country and you're trying to make friends in advance or even set up dates in advance, that makes perfect sense. But one thing that this did in Korea specifically is invite a whole bunch of K-pop fans out to meet their dream Korean oppa, and basically screwed up the whole dynamic of the app in Korea. So nowadays, if you get on Tinder Korea, what you'll see are a lot of profiles that will say no foreigners or only Koreans or no one outside of Korea. And I have never seen this until Tinder Passport launched. And so I think that this is creating a lot of misunderstanding. You might feel like, oh, Koreans are racist against other people. They don't want to meet anyone besides Koreans. And that could be true for some of the people on the app. But what I think is more likely the case is that so many of them had so many people who are actually not living in Korea flooding their swipes pretty much, to the point where they're just getting fed up and they're saying that they don't want to meet anyone besides Koreans because they think that that is the most likely case that that person would actually be here in the country. But because this also made it harder for me to use the app, I ended up paying for Tinder Gold so that I can see who already swiped me. And the funny thing is, a lot of the people who already swiped me also wrote in their profiles, no foreigners. So that's also what makes me think that this is not actually something to do with what ethnicity they want to date, but what trouble they're willing to go through. And in my profile specifically, I indicated in many ways that I am actually here in the country. But of course, there's people who don't actually read the profiles and they don't have time to be bothered to figure out, are you here or are you not here? And to be honest, I don't know why they wrote this in their profile, because they could simply swipe left. They don't have to go through the effort of writing this in their profile. But as far as the reasoning behind this, I think that it is more likely, again, to do with the fact that so many people are not in Korea and wasting their time. And this wouldn't be a problem, again, if people were honest. But not all people are honest. Who would have known? So I think that there's actually people pretending that they are here in Korea when they're really not here. And so a lot of the first messages that I'll get are you in Korea? And then there will be follow-up questions for me to like prove that I live here. And I can't say that this is something that would have happened if Tinder Passport didn't exist. Actually, I can say that it wouldn't have, because when I used Tinder before Tinder Passport launched, I never had these questions. I never had this kind of issue of like trying to prove that I do live here. And I think that this is entirely a result of Tinder Passport. And so what this means for the foreigners who do live here in Korea is that your chances to meet a Korean oppa or whoever you're after to meet just got that much lower. So basically, to summarize, foreigners on Tinder are now seen as a waste of time to some, and so they would rather not waste their time. They would rather tell you no foreigners because cannot deal with that. So that is a major reason why I wanted to cover this point first. I wanted to kind of address what I think could be a misunderstanding. Of course, it's not always a misunderstanding. There are probably people on the app who don't want to meet foreigners and they don't want to have to deal with you. And I guess they're having so many foreigners in their matches that, I mean, not matches, they're not swiping right, but like if they paid for Tinder Gold, they can already see who swiped them. So if they're seeing a lot of foreigners and they're seeing a lot of foreigners who don't live in Korea, they're just gonna be like, no. So just something to keep in mind if you are a foreigner using the app. Not all points will be foreigner centric, and please stay tuned. So another thing Tinder did was mass market, and we're talking every type of mass marketing that they could do, they did. Bus stop posters, Tinder bus stop posters. Billboards outside, Tinder billboards outside. Turn on the TV, there's a Tinder ad. At one point, it felt like everywhere I looked, there was an ad for Tinder. And this led to a huge spike in users. And this might sound like a good thing, except Korea is not the K-pop, K-drama fantasy land that you think it is. Keep in mind that this is the same country that just had a huge scandal of K-pop artists getting caught in a sex bust when they had hidden cameras and girls all over the place, you know, showing stuff they didn't mean to show. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that while it led to a huge spike in users, it also led to a huge spike in weirdos. So there's a lot more accounts that are asking for or advertising that they're interested in things like. So now you're seeing a whole lot more, you know, bodies with no clothes on. You're seeing a whole lot more like really greasy, disgusting, like people with no kind of personal hygiene, like for real. I'm not trying to be a hater. That is really like what the best explanation of their physical appearance would be. There's a lot more people that are saying in their profile like, hey, I don't have a job and I'm just trying to get laid. Like, they're not hiding it, not at all. Then there are the undercover ones where their profile looks normal, their photos look normal, but all of a sudden they'll slither in with the like, hey, I wonder what you look like with your clothes off. and all kinds of stuff like that. But that's not how the app was 5 years ago. And so I think like it has slowly transformed over the years, of course, but this huge spike of people coming led to a huge spike of different uses now for the app. Like it's not only people wanting to date. In fact, it's mostly not people wanting to date. It's more people wanting like a BDSM partner, or you know, sex buddy. Like I don't know what to tell you, but it's gotten real freaky over here on Tinder. Like it's either guys telling me like, hey, I only date black girls because only black girls can handle this, or it's guys who seem like they've never had a conversation with anyone except for their mother. So again, the chances of you meeting your dream K-pop oppa, sorry, one more time, I said it wrong according to this video, your dream Korean oppa are that much lower. Okay, so the next thing Tinder did, and I can't say that this was specifically in Korea, but it definitely did happen in Korea, is making fake profiles. There has been some speculation about this for a long time, but some of the part-time workers who are actually paid to make and run fake profiles have come forward and said like, yes, Tinder and other apps have had me as one of their staff, and my job is to sit behind a computer or sit on my phone and match everybody who comes along and talk to everybody who comes along and try to keep them engaged for as long as possible. And I'm not sure how it works, but I guess that it mainly targets those who are having a lull in real authentic matches. Even I have run across some of these like fake profiles, but it's usually pretty easy to tell that they're not real. Once you get into a conversation with them, their conversation skills and like the flow of the conversation starts to not make any sense. And like they'll say, for example, that they're Korean, but then their Korean is so bad that even I, a non-native speaker, can tell like, wait a minute, something is wrong with this conversation. Like it pretty much sounds like they're putting Chinese characters into a translation app and they're coming back, and so the word isn't wrong, like the word exists, but it's a word that nobody uses. It's a sentence structure that nobody would ever put together. And so I'm just like, I don't know like who you are, but you're not who you say you are, and so bye. In other cases, instead of sounding like they've put all the words through a translation app, they just sound like an AI. Like in some cases, of course, I'm speaking English, and so I'll say like, hey, how was your day? And then they'll just be like, you're pretty. And I'm just like, oh, okay, thank you. I mean, are you enjoying whatever happened to you today? And they're just like, what happened to you today? And I'm just like, okay, either you're not real or you don't care what I'm talking about and you're just talking to make the conversation keep going, and I'm not dumb enough to keep talking to you, so bye. And again, I don't know for sure, but there's a lot of speculation that a lot of these part-timers actually live in China or Singapore, or they're Chinese or Singaporean people who live here in Korea and needed a part-time job. And so that is why you'll see in people's profiles specifically that they wrote no Chinese, no Singaporeans. And again, in my opinion, there is no need to write such a thing. That is offensive, and it is also very negative, and I personally wouldn't want to match with anyone who wrote such negative things in their profile. But again, it's not because they hate Chinese people and hate Singaporean people. It's because that there were so many of these so many of these profiles claiming to be Chinese and Singaporean individuals that ended up turning out to be fake profiles. And so people just decided that they didn't have time to waste trying to figure out if they are real or not. Do I agree with that? No. I think that if you saw someone who you're interested in, regardless of their ethnicity, you should just swipe and see how it goes. If they're fake, you unmatch them. But if it happened enough times, I guess people would just get fed up enough. If it was me, I would just quit the app. If I'm so fed up that I have to write in my profile, I would just quit the app. But some people still want to try to use the app in a way that works for them, so they've chosen to write this into their profile and offend people, and this is the reason why. So while your very much real Korean oppa might be out there on Tinder, you might be wasting a lot of time with fake profiles. To that end, there might be people wondering if you are not the one that made the fake profile. So there might be a lot of questions that people have to ask that It's just them trying to prove whether or not you are a fake profile. So while on the one hand you might be wasting time talking to fake profiles that are keeping you from meeting your Korean oppa, or your Korean oppa might be wasting their time talking to fake profiles, unable to find you, the real profile. Or they might have found you, the real profile, but they were so worried that you were a fake profile that they've already unmatched you because they decided that you were fake. So this is why I think there are a lot of guys actually who, I keep being very like gender specific. So this is why I think that there are a lot of people who will ask you for your Kakao or your Line or your WhatsApp right away, like as soon as you've started the conversation. They're trying to get you off the app as soon as possible because they think that getting you off of this app is proof that you are actually who you say you are, and that you are not just like sitting behind some pay screen of like fake profileness. Nailed it. But pretty much I think that people have just come to understand that so many of the profiles are fake, or if they're not getting matches or they're not getting dates, they just assume that like, oh, that was a fake person. And so I think like while there was a huge spike in users, there's also a huge drop in users because they're just fed up with this kind of like time wasting fake profile reality. So that pretty much wraps up everything that I think is specifically Tinder's fault or Tinder's doing when it comes to the current state of Tinder as it is today in Korea. But unfortunately that's not it. If only that was all there was to say, but unfortunately there's more, so let's keep going. The next point was more of a lucky I don't know if I should say it was lucky, but it was a lucky break for Tinder that Corona happened, because basically there were more people unable to go out, unable to meet anyone, but they still want to talk to somebody, they still want human interaction, and they still want to go on dates, although, you know, the options are so much more limited. And so that led to a rise in users on Tinder again. Pretty much just like their mass advertising, now they have free mass advertising, which is coronavirus. And so increase in users, increase in desire to go out on dates, but an inability to do it equals increase in weirdos. So please go back to point 2, which was mass marketing and increase in weirdos, and find out why that was not good, but good for Tinder. So as for the people on the app, this also gave them an excuse to be weird while trying to pretend they weren't being weird. So there were a lot more messages like, hey, how about we have a date at my house because we shouldn't go outside right now, it's dangerous because of Corona. But long story short, there were a lot more people, there were a lot more men in my case, trying to get into my house, trying to invite me over to their house, but I don't think that is a safe option for a stranger or, you know, two strangers to do when they haven't met in real life and they met on an app. And so that was a downside of coronavirus, like a negative effect coronavirus had on Tinder specifically. In Korea. I don't know about the other countries. I'm gonna assume it was similar. So the last factor that I want to talk about that is actually not Tinder's fault is just something that is deep rooted in Korean perception, and that is the perception that foreigners are fast and easy. But the funny thing is they are. You'd be surprised actually how many other foreigners I've talked to who really just want to hook up, have a fling while they're here. Like maybe they're on a vacation, maybe they're here to study abroad, but while they're here they want to have fun, and so they get on Tinder and try to have fun. Then on the other hand, there are foreigners who are just so like convinced by K-drama that Koreans are very romantic and that they're all genuine and all their love is genuine, and so they end up getting taken advantage of. Not trying to say all Koreans are taking advantage of foreigners, just there are such people on Tinder and they know that foreigners like K-dramas, and so they say the lines, they say the beautiful words, and then next thing you know, you're in bed with them, and then next thing you know, they've ghosted you. So the point is, foreigners are seen as fast, and everybody knows this. And so on these apps, we're pretty much talked to as if we are free prostitutes. And sometimes I think they actually think that we are dumb. Like the types of things that people say to me as if I'm just gonna be like, okay, yeah, are so ridiculous. Like I talked to one guy for about a week, and then he asked me out, he asked me to go see a movie, and we already see the red flags here. If you're a foreigner that lives in Korea, you already know what the red flags of being asked to see a movie are. So I thought that he was going to ask me to go to a DVD room, which of course I'm not going to go to, but instead he asked me to go to a motel, which is, even better. His logic was, since we couldn't go to the movie theater because they're closed because of Corona, or they're not closed, but you can't sit together, that we should go to a motel. And apparently, like, I'm supposed to be so stupid that I'm like, yeah, makes perfect sense. We should go to a motel to watch a movie. I've had other guys just like skip the whole week of conversation and just tell me like, oh, I really wonder what you look like without your clothes on. I've had guys tell me that like I'm so beautiful, they want to meet me, but we have had zero conversation. Like, those kind of things are red flags, and they're moving things along quickly because they think that you move things along quickly, if you know what I mean. I'll probably just start sharing like the ridiculousness of, you know, what I see on these apps because it's just too good to keep to myself. And other foreigners have been warning about this perception for as long as I can remember. Like, even when I was young and YouTube like pretty much just started to exist, then people were already talking about like, hey, just so you know, like, Koreans think that foreigners are fast, so you should watch out for that. And it's not like I didn't believe them, I believed them. But now that I'm here and now that I see it, I really, really believe them. But seeing what I've seen over the last 5 years, I can understand why they've come to think this way. And even though I think that it's unfair because, of course, not everyone is into that, not everyone is like that, I mean, it is what it is. Like, it's one of those situations where it's already so like deep-rooted that there's literally no point in trying to fight people's opinion, especially when there's people who are proving that opinion to be accurate. But all you can do is try to be vigilant and watch out for this kind of like behavior, this kind of motive. You have to be able to screen for it, and you have to not be fast. So, I mean, you can be fast if you want to, no judgment. But if that's not what you're after, then you have to be able to screen through and, you know, call people out if that's what you think that they're doing. So, tying this all back together to what this video is about, you might be struggling to find the real Korean oppa because there are so many people pretending that they are your real Korean oppa when really they just want to go to bed with you. Is it easy to find a real one? No, it's not. But fortunately for you, I've written a very long list of rules to follow when using Tinder in Korea so that you don't get tricked by the fake Korean oppas. Great transition. So that concludes this video on all the reasons why I think that you'll have a hard time finding a nice Korean oppa on Tinder. It's not impossible, but it is very challenging and becoming more challenging every day. That thing about the rules that I wrote is totally true, actually. It's the only way that I've been able to use Tinder in a way that's been effective for me. To go out with people who don't have strange ulterior motives and actually to have some serious relationships through the app. So if you're interested in that, although again, this is not what I want my channel to be about, I will be releasing the rules after all these years of people asking me. And I'll also be sharing some stories that are like pretty much nightmare dates that I went on with people from Tinder in Korea, because I think like, why not share the funny ones? What I hope by the end of all of these videos is that you'll just learn how to be vigilant and how to be realistic, because I think that a lot of people either aren't realistic about their expectations, or they're just like so caught up in the fantasy, or the flip side, so caught up in the negativity based on their bad experiences that they're not sharing useful information with you. So if you want to see more, don't forget to... Ooh, is this closer to me? Go away. So if you are interested in seeing more, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click that bell for notifications on when I come out with my next video. And if you have a horror story of your own to share about your dating experience here in Korea, feel free to leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching. 다음에 봐요. Bye!